So in our last video, we were able to set up our enemies, walking enemies, and giving them a platform behavior to move between two areas in a patrolling fashion. Now that we have that set up, it's time to add some collectibles to our game. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I want to insert a new object. I'm going to choose the sprite object, and then I'm going to call this collectible. I'm going to insert, and I'm going to insert it just next to my player animation. I'm going to go to the folder in the upper left hand corner. If you're not already in the specific folder, if you're using this assets or you're using a different asset, hopefully you locate where those items may be. In this case, it's in the items folder. And in the video, the tutorial, they used the yellow collectible. So they'll go ahead and gem. So there is my collectible. I'm going to place this into position. Now, I could just leave this alone, fixed in the game, but I want to add a little bit of characteristic to this. So I'm going to go ahead and add a behavior, and I'm going to scroll down to movement, and I'm going to add the sign behavior. So just like the picture shows here in the actual icon, is that this cycles through and moves back and forth, left and right, or up and down. What we have in terms of the properties is that I want this gem to move up and down. So currently the movement is horizontal, left and right. I'm going to go ahead and change this to vertical. You have a lot of different other choices to pick from. If you decide you want to test those out, by all means, give that a shot. That's where you'll then expand on this tutorial and try new things. I'm going to keep it as a sine wave. The period, if I was to leave it at 4 and leave the default at 50, let's see what this looks like. So it's going to move up and down. And it's going to move up and down 50 pixels in each direction. And it's going to take 4 seconds to go through one cycle. That's too far of a distance and too slow of a distance. So I'm going to want to change my values here to make this a little bit closer together and not so distant. So I'm going to change the period to 2, and I'm going to go to the magnitude, and I'm going to go to 10 on the magnitude, and let's see what this looks like. And so my diamond now moving up and down, I feel at a good pace and enough to kind of entice the player to come collect the item. But if I was to try to collect this item, I can't yet. I have to create an event in order for my player to collect the item. I'm going to go over to the event sheet, and I'm going to make a new event. And we're going to go with the player box, and we're going to look for on collision with another object. The object that I want to collide with is the collectible. And once the player collides with the collectible, I need to then destroy that collectible. So if I add an action on the collectible object, I'm going to go down to the miscellaneous section, and I want to destroy. And that's going to get rid of that object from the scene. Let's go back and take a look and verify this is working correctly. The player jumps up, and as I jump, I can collect that diamond. It gets rid of it from the scene. But let's set up a way so that way every time we collect an item that we can keep track of it visually. One thing to note is that we're going to create a new layer here. One that most games have is UI or a HUD, a heads-up display. So currently, we've been working in the layer 0. So all these objects are in layer 0 right now. If I decide I want to add an additional layer, the free version of Construct allows for 2 different layers. But before I do that, I'm going to place some more gems throughout my level, because each new one that I place, it's going to put that in this layer 0. One up there, and then I'll put one up there, and then I'll maybe put one down here as well. So I've got all my collectibles in place. I'm going to go over to the layers panel. Now, if you don't see this layers panel, you might have your tile map panel opened up and it might be a tab at the bottom here. Or if this is missing, you can go to menu, go to view, bars, and double check that your layers bar is checked off. And so I'm going to rename this layer 0. I'm going to right click. I'm going to rename this because layer 0 really has no meaning. And all the objects are really in the game layer. And so what I could do is call it game or some other layer that has meaning behind the objects that live inside that layer. And then I'm going to make a brand new layer. Now before I do that, I'm going to look at some of the properties here. Is that this particular layer that we're currently on is at the bottom. So it's initially visible. It's not global, so it's not sharing objects. It's not transparent, and it has a background color opacity is 100%. Sometimes when students create new layers, they change some of the values or create the layers in the wrong order, and it hides objects. So food for thought is that work on building your game, and when you're ready to put up a heads-up display, at the very end, set that up. So right now, we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to add a layer to top. And I'm going to call this the HUD, or heads-up display. And on this particular one here, is that currently this parallax effect, is that as you're moving, things are kind of moving with you. I want all of the objects that are going to be in this HUD layer to stay fixed on the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 0 and 0 on the parallax to keep it fixed and in place. And actually, you know what? We'll take a step back here. Let's put that back to 100% and 100% for the moment. Let's create the object. So it's going to be selected. Now you can lock these layers. When you lock these layers, any object in that layer cannot be moved around. And sometimes this is a good idea to lock your layer. And you can even turn off the layer just to hide some of the graphics as you're building the other layers. But make sure that whenever you put new objects in, whatever layer is selected and unlocked, that's where that object is going to be placed into. And so right now I'm working in the HUD layer. I'm going to lock the game layer and make sure HUD is selected. So that way now I can insert a new object. I'm going to insert the text object. And then for short, I'm going to go ahead and put TXT. And then I'm going to put score. So TXT is short for text, and then the word score. I want to insert. I'm going to put this up above for the moment. And now there is a default size, and the text is black. All this properties are down at the bottom. So right now the text that's shown is the word text. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put the word score with a colon, and the word and the numbers, we'll just do 0, and I'll hit enter. And it's going to change that in the actual example. The font black, I'm going to go ahead and use a color similar to this. I like the brown, so I'm going to match the brown. So I'm going to grab the color, and they have one that's similar to this color here, right here. And then I'm going to grab this. Now currently I have this snapping to grid, which means that it's going to pin itself to that upper left hand corner is where it's being pinned to. I could change that down here where you have the origin. I could go to center, and that way there's a center pinning like so. I could change it to other different position, but I'll keep it in the top left. And then I'm also going to change the font size. Let's go up to 26. I'm going to make this too large. Okay. because it's pinning and it's putting it right up next to the corner, I want to give this a little bit of space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the snap to grid, and then I'm going to use the arrow keys just to move this down slightly and just over slightly. So that way there's a little bit of a buffer around there. Okay. So now this text of score is in the HUD layer, and I left on the HUD layer, I left the parallax at 100%. So let's take a look at what's going on. So when I jump into the game, the word score is there, but if I start to move along, the score stays where it's at. Just like the collectible that I left there, it's going to stay there in that position. This is where you would like to change the parallax on that layer. So HUD layer, go to parallax, I'm going to go to 0 and 0. And now when I preview the game, if I move, so does the score. But as I move, it's way over here. So that was a big gap. So that looked okay. Once I was over here, I can't go beyond this wall here. That looks okay there, but as I move to the right, there's leaving a big gap here, and that does not look right. So let's fix that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn back on the snap to grid, put it back in the corner, and then I'm gonna put this down. So my alignment is I'm gonna go center. Let's take a look at what that looks like in our preview. It's looking better, but yet as I go over here, I still have a big gap. So I'm gonna move it. And even though those blocks are there, if I put that like so, all the way in the corner, it looks bad there, but as I move, yeah, it's still kind of crammed in that corner there. So obviously, taking time to reposition and get your items set up is definitely a must in terms of the game kind of look and feel. But for right now, I'm going to leave it just over like that for right now. And so as I collect these diamonds, I want this score to change. So I'm going to go to the event sheet, and over here in the margin, like say right next to the number 1, or even down here at the very bottom, is that you can right click, and I'm going to add a global variable, and I'm going to add a score variable, capital S. This will be a number, and the initial value will be 0. So there is my global score variable. And so here, as the player collides with the collectible and it destroys the collectible, I want to add some points to that variable. So I'm going to add action. This is going to be on the system object. Next. And then I'm going to scroll down to global and local, and I want to add 2. I'm adding to the score. Now you could have multiple variables that you want to add to, but in this case we just have one. And I'm going to give this 10 points. So every time I click the diamond, I'll get 10 points. And so these run in order, and it happens so fast that it will add 10 to it, but I like to add the points first and then destroy the object so I know they're happening in order. And even though I have this, the actual text will not change until we ask this object to change its value. So what I can do is I could add the text object up here on line number 1 so that every second the game runs, it will display the correct score. Or whenever you collect an item, you can also update that text object there as well. So 2 different locations, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it up here. So this is running every second the game is running. So I'm going to add action. So this is going to be on the text object now. And then next. And then I want to scroll down to the under text, I want to set the text. So that default word that I wrote, score, with the 0, I want to update that. Next. So it has to be inside the, so any text that you want to write out that's not from a variable, you need to write it in the double quotes. So I'm going to write the word score, colon, and then a space. So that way it actually prints out a space in the actual text, followed by the ampersand. That's going to be shift number 7, followed by the global variable of the word score. So what this is, the score variable is like a box or container. So every time you collect the diamond, it puts 10 into the box and keeps adding 10 to the box. And then I'm going to concatenate or combine the output here. So done. I'm going to go back to our layout. Go ahead and go into the game to preview. Currently our score is 0. So I'm going to jump up, collect the diamond, and now my score has changed to 10. I'll collect this one and 10 as well. But let's say I missed that diamond and I happen to fall off the layer. Well, our player hasn't died yet. We haven't covered that yet. But this variable would then keep its value. If you were to die and restart the level, it keeps that value going. And so we'll look at different ways to change that. So every time you preview your level, it'll go back to 0. But as you're playing the game, it'll keep track of this and update it with a score. So there's 30, and then 40, and then 50. And there we have it. So we've able to create a collectible and then also keep track of that collectible with a global variable and a HUD layer that displays that information for us. Hopefully that's helpful for you, and I'll catch you in the next video.